Welcome to the Voice of Retail for the week of September 2nd, 2019. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. He's been called the rock star of digital media by Strategy Magazine and the real deal by Seth Godin. Veteran podcaster, best-selling author, and global keynote speaker Mitch Joel is my very special guest. I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with Mitch for almost 2 decades, but we catch up after almost 5 years, surrounded by the images of the 50th anniversary of the John Lennon Bed-IN for Peace at the Fairmont Queen Elizabeth in Montreal, as Mitch helps us decode the future. Next, I visit a rising star of e-commerce and marketing in Canada. Johnny Russo is my guest in his offices at the Kirscher Group. We catch up with Johnny on his move back to Montreal from Calgary, current role, his agile philosophy, and approach to attracting talent and building a team in the hyper-competitive retail and e-commerce space. Lastly, I'll take a look at the retail news of the week, but first, let's listen to my interview with Mitch Joel. Mitch, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you today?
I'm really great, and I'm happy to be sitting here with you because as I sit across, I was trying to think of how many years it's been since we've seen each other.
I want to say 5, which is
5?
4.5 at least too many.
And we've known each other for, I'm going to say 15 years.
Yeah, I'd stretch that out to even longer. So
maybe.
It
could be. It's good to see you.
Well, it's great to see you.
You look young and fresh.
As do you. We're going to do more interviews, I think, if we keep talking about this. Listen, thanks. I'm here in Montreal, in your hometown, and I thought, what a great opportunity to sit down with you and chit and chat. I'm a little bit nervous, actually. You're such a veteran podcaster,
right?
You're 1,000 episodes in, and
not 1,000, but a lot. It's been many years. I started really early. Yeah. I do it weekly. We're recording this show. I don't know when it'll air. Almost September, and I'm about at like 680 on one show, which is called 6 Pixels of Separation, where I do sort of like this weekly business conversation, really in depth, and I love doing it. I have another show that I've been doing for a while where I'm slowly trying to build the largest oral history of electric bass players called Groove, the No Treble Podcast, which has been like almost 4 or 5 years. It's a monthly show, similar format, like a long-form conversation. And in the audio space, I still do like a radio hit every Monday for Shom FM, which is iHeartRadio, talking about digital culture, internet culture, memes, things like that.
Well, let's step back a few ticks and tell us a little bit about yourself for the listeners who may not know of you, and give us some of your background and your personal journey and what you're doing today.
Yeah, I think the big thing that I'm probably known for is I helped build and launch a digital agency that was called Twist Image. That became a national agency that we then sold to WPP about 4 or 5 years ago, and that agency became Mirum, which became a global digital agency with about 3,000 people in 30 countries. Yep. And in the building of that business, we were really early day into social in terms of it being a platform by which to build and market the brand with. And I became the face of that. I'm a writer by trade also, a journalist. So we had this blog called 6 Pixels of Separation. That was the name of the blog. It still is, still the name of the podcast. And I think if you want to dig, with the exception of Twit, This Week in Tech, and Leo Laporte, I think I may have the longest running podcast. I don't know. Yeah. And from that, I started speaking a lot. I do about 40 to 60 speaking events. I've been doing that for close to 15 years.
And what kind of companies would you speak for? Who would bring you in to chit and chat?
It's everybody from the Shopify, Twitter, Googles of the world to the Retail Council of Canada's. To usually it's corporate, trade association, or just sort of ticketed events. So I'll do things like the art of marketing or the art of leadership, those types of events too.
People are trying to understand what's going on in digital, what's going on in the society.
Yeah, it was really specific for many years to digital marketing because that's what we were selling as services. Sure. And the transition that I went through in terms of the content was more to this idea of decoding the future. Like, what is happening now that's going to impact my tomorrow, and how do I make it work? And it just so happens, and I've done events obviously for Retail Council of Canada and other associations related to retail, that I just happen to have a bit of a retail thing in me. My father was a retailer. I spent a lot of time growing up in a store. I've always loved it. It's still sort of like my passion literally is hitting cities when I'm speaking and going to big shopping malls and stuff like that. I'm an investor in certain real estate-based businesses. It's been a lot of fun. And then prior to that, I had been a publisher of magazines that were on the internet also very early. They were traditional print magazines. I helped launch one of the first search engines before Google existed, helped launch one of the first mobile content platforms before that was something.
And we worked together actually when I was at the Shopping Channel.
Yeah.
We worked together on launching our Twitter site, and that was
true.
very, very early days. And
it was exciting,
when we looked around and we said we need some help with this. It wasn't a big field, but we found the right person for sure and the right team.
Well, at the time also we were involved, both of us also in the Canadian Marketing Association.
Right, that's right.
And then in the sort of period of that, I published two books. One was called 6 Pixels of Separation, and the second one was called Control Alt Delete.
Best-selling books, fantastic. Still, I think the testament of these books is they're still relevant reading. This number of years. I mean, they've been published a few years ago, to say the least, but they're still relevant reading. Right?
It feels old to me. I actually did go back over the summer and took a look, and I felt really happy with the idea that, while the names may have changed in terms of the platforms, and a lot of platforms didn't exist, the last book was 6 years old, the other one was probably 9 or 10, I think the philosophy and ethos stands.
Right.
I think the stuff that changed it dramatically is just the nature of what's happened with data and the usage of it across social platforms and the sort of eyeballing that's being done now towards tech not being so hopeful and nice, but rather scrutinized and potentially broken up.
Tech salad days are over, clearly.
Yeah, and again, I do sort of look at it and think that I'm mad that I was right. Right, because I did perceive it in a positive way, and I don't think I spent enough time thinking about, as positive as this is, if I'm accurate, what are the negative downsides of it. And data's always been a funny thing to me, and when I speak about it, I speak really candidly about it. Sure. I think data's an amazing way for retailers to be really personable with their customers, and I think the problem is when I say personable, they think personal. And it's not the same thing at all. And when I look at products and services, and being a professional marketer and an entrepreneur and as somebody who just loves the space, we went from a world where we're data starved to a world where we're data overloaded. And I don't know that any retailers or brands really stop to think about, what do we really need to know in order to sell this pair of glasses, this car, this shirt? I think the answer is you don't need much. I just think that you don't need much. And I don't know what this sort of mindset is of this sort of constant consumption of data or need to have personal information versus personable information. And I don't.
It's a great distinction, by the way, because retailers are always talking about and are always being told they need to be both relevant, very true, and somehow personalized. Somehow personalize the experience to feel like it's relevant. And I think sometimes that means I need more data to make it more. But what you're saying is more isn't necessarily better. More is just more. Yeah,
and I also think the difference is, people don't know if I have a spouse or how many kids I have, because I haven't really posted any of that in social channels. And the argument would be, well, you're not really being personal, and that's going to impede your numbers or your growth. And that was where the argument, or my argument, created about, well, I'm highly personable. You do see a lot of my quirkier sides. It's not just, it's not just all business. I just think that we have to think about how can we be personable versus personal. So the challenge with personal is it has to be both parties who want to take part in that. And I just fundamentally don't believe, with the exception of a few retailers or brands, that people want to have the brand or retailer know a lot of personal things about me. I think that we want it to be personable. You know my style, you know my taste.
Sure.
You maybe know when I'm due for something new. But the personal stuff, the sort of how many kids, the where you live, all that stuff, I think it's getting to be a little much.
It feels like Apple, from a brand perspective, is aligned with what you're talking about. They seem to have put a line in the sand around privacy. I mean, their new credit card they've launched recently talks a lot about it's a new next generation of credit card that we won't share your data in one way, shape, or another. And they've made a few statements along those lines. How do you see Apple in and amongst all that?
I don't know.
Is that a viable brand platform for them,
I don't know if I'm
think?
fully on board with that. I think Apple is one of those unique brands that just simply does what it wants and the market follows. I do believe on the personable side, and what they do exceptionally well is definitely their service. I mean, it's beyond my comprehension that I can go on right now, book my own appointment, not speak to anybody, within a couple hours be at a store and have things like, my R or S key that have flipped off my keyboard be replaced literally while I wait, or if a screen breaks on my spouse's iPhone or whatever it might be.
Right.
That at that scale, at that multi-billion-dollar massive scale, that they can service me in such a personable way. And then also just the technology and infrastructure around it that supports it. I also think what makes Apple highly personable is that you don't feel like the assets are cross-pollinating. So my sort of preferences in Apple Music don't sort of show up in my world necessarily when I'm looking for a new MacBook or a watch. They feel like these independent life sources. And I think what they've done, better than most, and it's the cliche, is it's the sort of design and marketing of it that makes you feel like it's a better product. I was very late to Apple. I was actually the guy who was on BlackBerry and trying to find the slimmest PCs or Mac or not Macs, but sort of portable like laptops.
It's funny. I think I have this recollection where you and I were together, and you were like so excited, and you pulled out a MacBook Air. Out of your backpack. So this is it. I found it.
I literally, we're going back years, but I went to the Apple store. I bought an iPhone and a MacBook. It might have been an Air. And I said, I'm going to travel with both systems, BlackBerry and PC, and until I feel really comfortable. And I bought it on a weekend, and by Monday, I was done. And so I think they have a lot of these built. I talk a lot about hooks in my work. Like they have these hooks built into it. I don't necessarily feel like they're overly personal with me. In fact, I have frustrations with them. I'll go into Apple Music and look at the recommendations and be like, you should know a lot more. And I don't know if it just they have a non-sophisticated or not as good algorithm as an Amazon. So I don't know how I don't necessarily see them as these sort of bearers of true data, because the truth is we don't know what's happening behind the scenes.
Sure.
And we don't know in a world where it's a one login. I mean, they do know everything about every device I have, spouse usage. They know more than anybody. I'm not saying that they're doing anything with it but
it's a good exploration of the issue. So we're talking about Apple, but it's a great exploration of the issue from both a tech perspective and as a retail.
They don't make you feel creeped out, which I think is a pretty quality place to be.
When you meet with and you sit with retailers at a very senior level and people who work with, what do you hear often when they ask you questions? What is it that's driving your content development? The questions you're trying to answer on their behalf. What are the kind of the most common things that you get asked in your role?
So for me, I still believe that it's tragic that there is such a massive delineation between online and offline. I think that's still a huge thing. We were talking before we started recording about Shopify as an example. And
sure.
I'm very lucky to have known Toby and Harley from almost day one, and Harley's a real good friend of mine. And it still boggles my mind that everyone is so hot about it, and like e-commerce is sort of 20 plus years old. They're doing different things, and they're a much more likable brand, and they're a great product.
Yeah.
But the ability to sell stuff online is almost being promoted as this sort of new and emerging thing, and it's
new and improved. We can sell online now.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing one of my favorite companies in the world. But this idea that like I can't walk into a store, they might be out of my size, they might not have as many quantities as I want, and that it can't be then just done for me in an hour, same day, next day, 3 days, that it's so disconnected, those two experiences. I find it extremely irritating. I think
And do you think for retailers that that's the path to, ultimately the path to success? It's not easy to do.
I don't think I know. And I know because what they're complaining about I don't see as much. Them complaining about traffic is down, people are buying online. Michael, you and I can walk underground across here to Place Ville, it's right here, PVM. And they have shops that are basically boarded up because they're renovating this amazing piece, but there are stores that are open and they're packed. If you come with me to Florida and go to Aventura Mall, you can't find a parking spot. If you had driven with me last week to Woodbury, which are the outlets outside of New York City, you can't find. If you went with me to Decode, which is sort of like a massive shopping infrastructure here outside of Montreal, it's hard to find parking. It's hard to maneuver. I mean, I was in the Indigo during the week, and you couldn't move around. So I don't necessarily buy into the whole nobody does this anymore. What I do buy into is the problem that they face is a real estate problem. There's too much real estate that is allocated to retail, and they're not focusing or growing in the areas that they could or should. So they sort of got maybe very bullish too early and took on a lot of real estate, and that has a lot of overhead and a lot of people. And I think that impacts the stores that are super hot, or that could be better, or that could be rejuvenated.
Sure.
And I think that they ultimately have both a real estate and that merchandising problem, which is that they just can't satiate me in a true, what we would call omni-channel way, which I can't believe we're still using that word in this day and age. It boggles my mind that a .ca or a .com is not linked directly with the physical retailness of it. Now, with that, I also think that there's a lot of missed opportunities for smaller space stores, for stores that are more regional, for opportunities to think about what can they bring. And the reason I say that is I was thinking about this conversation, and I was like, what's the last thing I ordered from Amazon? It was this week, and I'll tell you what it is. It's a bit personal, but I'll tell you. One was a bottle blender, because I'm trying out Athletic Greens, so it's sort of like a water bottle with a little sponge thing in it you can shake. Yeah. One was a Funko Pop vinyl figure, because I can't find the Dr. Seuss one that I wanted. And third was a book that I've been looking for that actually was from Ben Folds, one of the musicians, his book on creativity that I couldn't find.
Ben Folds 5, right?
Yeah,
is that his
from Ben Folds 5. And I'd actually gone to multiple retailers, both in Canada and the U.S. over the past couple of weeks because it's been summer vacation, and I just haven't been able to find those products. And then I find them and I order them, and they're there, under 24 hours later, sure. And the price is better than everywhere. Now, I'm not saying you should be knowing what Mitch Joel wants and how to merchandise against me, but I'm also saying that we do live in a world where you can understand that consumer a lot better. There's no one store that could sell that to me, but I went into multiple sports stores for the bottle blender. I went into multiple, sort of like music / culture / bookstores for the pop figure or the book. I should never be in a place where I'm also leaving without letting people know what I'm looking for and how quickly they can help me get it.
Pretty long tail items, so to speak, in the vernacular.
Well,
of retail,
right? I think it's a tough sell for me on that. One is it's a book, and I think bookstores are busy, and I see them being busy. Maybe not in whoever's town is listening, but in the places I go. Whether it's Barnes & Noble's out in Scarsdale, there's 2 of them, rocking and slamming. Whether it's the Indigo stores here that would be super busy. Funko, this is it's almost $1 billion business now. And I mean, they're everywhere from Walmart and Target to down to more bespoke. And if you're talking about the bottle blender, I mean, we're talking basically about every single pharmacy, every single GNC or nutrition-based store, any single physical workout store from your sport experts to, I mean, you could go down the list. So I don't know. That's the merchandising question. Do you really understand, and are you playing in a way in which you could invite or introduce these new products or newish products that seem to have hit some form of zeitgeist? And I don't think I'm a long tail person. I think I'm just looking because they're out in the zeitgeist.
Interesting. How do you translate? Kind of the last question. How do you translate your personal experiences? It's kind of a tradecraft question. Your personal experiences, your observations at the industry level, into what you bring onto the stage or into your writing. How do you translate those two? And just, I guess, the lessons learned is synthesizing these experiences and then saying, from a strategic perspective, whether you're a retailer, small, big, Main Street, or large, how do you synthesize that together? And then
I don't. I think that they are completely divisive environments. What I was just telling you is purely a market of one, and it's a terrible market set for any retailer to base their business on. When I'm on stage and live, I'm not doing any market of one stories. I'm not like, hey guys, I was in your store and I couldn't get service. What I am doing is speaking from a career that is now over 30 years in media, in publishing, in marketing, in mobile, in search, in commerce, in e-commerce, in social, and I could go on. And I'm actually more of an infovore out in the world of what is happening at a grander scheme in terms of data or retail or new technologies, and showing examples of why the world is changing. So a quick example would be if we talked about streaming services and Netflix, the average retailer would sit here and go, I don't know what my play is. What's my play? That I sell digital-only assets? And I actually talked about that 15 years ago. I thought that they should. I think that the Walmarts of the world should have had their own branded version of Netflix they could sell digitally along with all the other assets that they're connecting with. When I think about streaming, Netflix, Apple Music, whatever you like, what I actually believe is there's a fundamental shift in human buying behavior. And that shift is more of people are willing to not buy one thing in order to pay a small monthly fee of access to everything. So now the question becomes for retailers, what could those models look like?
Right.
And a great example of that would be Burger King. Burger King, who are trying probably desperately to keep pace with the McDonald's of the world, have a situation where McDonald's is fighting really aggressively against the Starbucks of the world. And the McCafe, I think, has been tremendously successful. You would know more than I would if that is true or not. It just looks optically to me that McCafes are killing it. And what Burger King did very recently is in the States, they launched a $5 subscription club to coffee. So for $5 a month, you subscribe, and you can just go into your Burger King and get your coffee. Now, as long as the product is there and the environment meets, let's call it the standard of a McCafe or Starbucks, or even not, maybe it's more for the people on the go, but that's a great price. I'm paying the price of a latte at Starbucks to have a subscription model. Well, they just solved for the Netflix model in their world.
Well, it's very topical. Pages ripped from the news this week as Hudson's Bay sells Lord & Taylor to a company called Le Tote, who I'd never heard of.
Well, they're DTC, and I'm definitely aggressively following that space too.
And I know lots of companies, but I'm like, I'd never heard of them, but it is that kind of rent-to-own, not rent-to-own, but it's a rental service.
Well, I have a different take on that. My take on that is very aligned with Tom Goodwin. Tom Goodwin's from Zenith Optimedia, and he's got that famous quote that, Uber, the world's largest taxi company, owns no cars. You probably heard this. Airbnb, the world's largest, owns no rooms. But Tom updated that slide last year, and obviously Uber increasingly owns cars. Amazon's got hundreds of stores through Whole Foods and Go stores and on and on. Sure. Facebook pays for content at a certain level. Things change is sort of his message. Right. And when I see a Le Tote do a Lord & Taylor acquisition, I think it's a very good signal to traditional retailers. And the message is, no matter how disruptive we are being, no matter how much DTC seems to be at the top, no matter how many times you'll get a tall, bald guy dressed in black, that's me, on stage talking to you about the disruptive nature of a Kylie Cosmetics to a retailer, the other reality is that for Kylie to truly scale and for other DTCs to truly scale, they're going to adopt your model. And the reason your model is because you probably, if you're a retailer, spent decades figuring out the model. And what these new disruptors, I think, are realizing really quickly is if they want real scale and real embedded culture with consumers, they have to be physically where they are. And when I look at those numbers and that deal, actually, it pains me because it bothers me that an asset like that was let go when had they sort of thought about, well, why are they buying us and what can we do? Off you go. The other side of that argument, of course, is that this is just a real estate. I mean, that's the general sort of answer we'll get to all the time when we talk about retail is it retail or is it real estate? And I think that's the bigger question because Lord & Taylor occupied a lot of real estate.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, the answer to that question is it one or the other? The answer is yes. I mean, it's
right. It's both, not an either or.
It's both for sure. Great discussion. It's been great to catch up and get the latest of your thoughts and just reconnect. So wonderful to do so. If listeners want to get a hold of you or learn more about you and your work, how do they do that?
Sure. So content is always at 6pixels.com. If you want to learn more about me speaking, advising, investing, go to mitchjoel.com, and the truth is both obviously linked to one another, so it doesn't matter which one you go to.
Well, fantastic. Well, they get to you in either way. Listen, thanks again for sitting down, taking the time out of your day to join me here in Montreal, and wonderful to see you, and look forward to catching up again in a future episode.
Well, it's good to see you, and I'm glad to see your podcasting.
High praise indeed. Thank you.
Thanks.
Johnny, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you today?
I'm glad to be here. I'm doing well. Thanks, Michael.
Well, I'm excited to be in Montreal. This is my second interview here in Montreal. We just listened to Mitch Joel, and now I get to catch up with you. It's been a couple of years. I think the last time you and I saw each other was in Vancouver at an SCI event, but lots happened since then. So let's get started. Tell us a little bit about your personal journey, and then what you're doing here today.
Sure. Yes, it's funny that you've had Mitch Joel on today because he's a mentor and actually followed similar career paths. Although he's way more successful than I am, but
he's way more successful than a lot of people.
He's doing pretty well.
There's a big group of us who fall into that.
Yeah, but I love his books. I started in journalism. I wanted to actually be a sportscaster, preferably on the Sports Network or ESPN, but I really wanted to be a sportscaster. I was actually better at writing than probably broadcasting or communication at the time, but had an internship with the Montreal Gazette. Being in Montreal, English language media wasn't exactly easy to get a job as digital was coming up. And I actually moved to Ottawa for a couple of years. And my first job there, and I needed to pay the rent, was in marketing. And after about 2 weeks, and I picked up a book called Guerrilla Marketing by J. Conrad Levinson, and I'll never forget it. But after that 2 weeks, I decided I wanted to be in marketing. I absolutely loved the topic. And so I self-taught my way through marketing and digital. And thankfully, the marketing job I did get into was on the digital side. So still learning about brand and advertising and all that, but it was really focused on digital, B2B spaced. Moved back to Montreal, got into manufacturing for a couple of years, which was great because I was still learning, right? So I was still learning about marketing and branding and advertising and how business really comes together because I was focused on journalism before that.
Right.
And got into manufacturing, which was slow paced, but it allowed me to learn. And then got an opportunity in retail for Buffalo Jeans. In between that, worked for a couple of startups, so got a feel for how technology was embedded in today's workplace. And then got into retail and really felt at home. It felt like this was the industry which married technology as e-commerce was coming up. Retail and then my communications background kind of fit in. And I've been in retail ever since. So for the last 10 years or so, I've been in retail and absolutely love it. And I love the pace of it. And I love the changes that are still upon us. And I love the fact that you can scale quite quickly if you do this right. And not a ton of industries are like that, but I think we have that. You could also fail really quickly in retail, as we've seen, or sometimes it takes years. But that's kind of my journey on how I got into this industry.
It's so interesting because I talk to a lot of people, and often, more often than not, getting into retail wasn't where they started or where they pointed the direction. For some, it was a family business and they loved retail from the beginning. Like myself, I was in other types of business. I was in marketing and then found my way into retail. In Ottawa, actually. So I'm born and raised in Ottawa as well. Ottawa is such an interesting town now because when I was there, probably the same when you, it was mostly a government town with a few startups and a little bit of stuff. Now with Shopify, it's just revolutionized the city. Talking about scale and how e-commerce, I want to get to that later, but from a technology perspective, what a difference these platforms are starting to make, right?
Totally.
For in terms of speed, execution, and what you have to worry about now versus what you have to worry about before. Tell us about what you do here.
Yeah, so the Kershey Group is a sleepwear company, so kids and adults sleepwear. We are on the manufacturing side, so we sell into a bunch of retailers that you'll likely know, like Walmart and the Bay and Winners, and we also have a direct-to-consumer business. And that's one of the main reasons that I'm here as well, is to drive the direct-to-consumer business. So we have, speaking of Shopify, we have a few of our brands on the Shopify platform.
Great.
We also sell on Amazon. So many distribution points. And I was on the enterprise side coming here before with Marks and Canadian Tire. And it's been interesting. We said we met up, probably a year ago or so in Vancouver, and lots changed because I was in Calgary for about 4 years, and then actually came back to Montreal. And to tell you the truth, I didn't have a lot of intention of coming back to Montreal, but this opportunity and the people that I met at this company really, it pulled you back. Yeah, right? It did pull me back, and it's exciting. I mean, as you see, For people listening, you can't see, but there's a bunch of our collection for spring and fall.
Yeah, great license. I'll put a link to the website in the show notes so they can at least see what's the latest. Right?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've been on the small to mid-size, family-run, public enterprise, and I would if there's people listeners out there, I think it's good. It's good to dabble in some of those and figure out where your skill set maybe aligns. For me, culture was a really important reason why I joined this company. And I think I've made the right choice because we're having a really good time.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit. Tell me, what is it about the culture here? It's obviously a smaller footprint than being part of the large Canadian Tire family, so that's obvious. We can get past that. But what is it about the culture? And I guess that will help me understand what you were looking for, and then we can talk about how you build teams here. But what was it that got your attention out of all the opportunities I'm sure you had? What is it that grabbed your attention?
There was a couple, thankfully, but they speak about family, or I should say we speak about family here quite often, and sometimes when there's mission or value statements, they're really just words on a page, and I felt it different here from day one, and I don't think you probably saw, but even here, there was a couple of, because school's starting here, and there's a couple of kids that are actually in the office because there was no daycare or summer camp available, and school's starting. So that whole family type feel, it's a family run business, but you feel part of the family really early on, from day one. And I appreciate that, and I actually felt it. And when I am recruiting, and when HR is recruiting, it's not a tough sell because they can see it in our voice, we're this is legit and it's the truth. And everybody we've recruited that's come on board has said, Johnny, you we thought you were trying to sell us all this stuff, but you were actually underselling it.
Come on, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, and every company has a culture or a way of doing things, and maybe this isn't a fit for everybody and how they've built it, but I absolutely love it, and the people we've brought on love it. There's an energy inside this building, and it's really fun, to come to work, and our team. We're how digital is, and we like to stay connected, and we have summer Fridays, and we tend to finish early, and as much as we try to get out here at 3, sometimes our team hasn't actually enjoyed it yet because we're so
engaged
and
that's fantastic.
And we want to build out Q4, right? So we got some timelines to get done, but we're enjoying it here.
And your role is broader than digital, right? It also encompasses the marketing piece, right?
So the marketing, the brand piece, digital marketing, and e-commerce, right? Yeah, so that was really important to me for my next role, was really to encompass all three and put them together.
From your perspective, both from your history and what you've done before and what you've been doing here, what are the kind of top trends that you've been seeing that have kind of caught your attention that are informing your decisions about how to build teams and how to build even technology platforms? We mentioned Shopify. That's a different approach. Yeah. And then what changes are happening in the customer level? What observations do you have?
Yeah. So I'll start on the team side first for us, and and I'm not saying every department should recruit like this or hire like this, but definitely on the marketing front, on the e-commerce front, there's a technology aspect, so we definitely look for people that are comfortable with technology, and that kind of spills over into some other things. Generally, people that are comfortable with technology, and by that I mean kind of on the advanced side, are also comfortable with change. So that status quo thinking, especially on our team, probably you won't do really well if you fight the status quo. And so we look for that type of personality, are you comfortable with change, and kind of dive into that a bit.
And you were a big proponent. I remember now that I'm thinking about it back in the last time we saw each other, we were talking about agile
Huge.
development and just that different approach, right?
Yeah. So, funny enough, during the interview phase when I came here, they mentioned that they did daily huddles. And so it wasn't necessarily like a scrum, but they did daily huddles. And so the leadership team does it, and then it flows down to their teams. And that was something that a lot of companies have trouble actually doing. And this was a company that was doing it for like 2 years. And we do it with our team, and we have scrums. So we make it more like on that, how developers would do it, but for a marketing and e-commerce angle. So we're actually having scrums and being agile with our work. And we change priorities, frequently from a Monday to Friday. Even sometimes the priorities change, but we're all going in the same direction, which is so important, that communication piece. Yeah, so still a huge advocate of Agile, and it's fun to see that the whole company is actually on board with daily face-to-face communication. Really important.
What's interesting, because as you say, the fit was already there. You didn't have to import a philosophy. You're basically part of the philosophy.
Makes it easier, doesn't it? when you don't have to do that education piece all the time.
And it's philosophical, right? So I found in organizations it's less about education, about how to do scrums, and so there's a bit of that, but it's also about the philosophy and the culture of the company as well. Whether there's a fit for that.
Yeah, there's a buy-in, right? That you're either bought into it or not.
As you said, I love your approach, because the people, marketers or whoever are more tech savvy, have that flexibility and just that kind of approach, that near-time approach. That can be a bit. Do you ever find that gets a bit too chaotic or a bit too frenetic? In other words, we're too focused on short term, and we're trying to build out longer, and do you ever find that attention span is a bit too short, or how do you navigate around that?
That's a great question. We keep it to like 15 or 20 minutes, and we have let's say quarterly or yearly priorities. These daily ones generally lather up into those,
right?
Kind of like having weekly, monthly, and yearly goals. These kind of lather up into that. So it's rare to see like something that needs to happen by 3 p.m. not be talked about weeks before,
right?
So those deadlines are talked about.
So there's fence posts in there. Today it's Monday. It's Monday, January 1st. We're working towards April 30th.
Yeah,
objectives
or something that has to happen in 2 weeks from now. Are you on course? Are there any blockers? That type of stuff. But for sure, sometimes it could go off track, and you just say, hey, we're going to put that in a parking lot, and you parking lot those items or take them offline.
Yeah.
That for sure happens in any type of daily meeting has the potential to do that. And then managing time becomes important. And then, back to your original question, like the other aspect that we look for is really on the optimism and positivity side. We don't need everyone 100% of the time to be happy and smile and laugh, but like it goes a long way, especially in digital today. Like you're going to run into issues. It's going to be tech, site issues. There's going to be issues with technology, because we deal with technology, right? There's going to be certain things that pop up, or priorities that change because one of our, let's say, retail partners like a Walmart needs something, and that backs up everything else that we need. Sure. Because we need to prioritize. So I've generally found like if you have some of those personality traits, they all kind of work together and helps the team move forward together. And my job too is also making sure that we're not all the same type of personalities. Like I don't want 8 different Johnnies. I want their own personalities that all work together as a team. So we're looking for extroverts, introverts, all the different personalities.
Detail oriented, big picture.
Yeah,
oriented,
exactly.
All that
like the blue types, the red types. We're looking for a mixture. So that's really important for me, and it's been working. I've been lucky to have been on some really good teams with some really good bosses, and at some point you almost feel like there's a framework that's working, and I've felt that, and that's why I was really confident coming in here in being able to build the team that I think we needed to succeed as a department, and more importantly as a company. And that culture piece is a really important. So when you talk about positivity and optimism, and challenging the status quo, and being open to change, and being able to adapt, and Scrum, like it almost ties together, and they each relate to each other. And so we've had some good success, and we've also had a lot of laughs along the way, which is really important in this industry.
Right on. So let's talk about tech for a bit. You've been steeped in technology from your different roles. What's the latest thing? Again, we talked about Shopify a little bit as these SaaS type platforms, but what's your perspective on the latest and greatest in how you build sites and how you develop and the perspectives around different tools? Yeah,
it's interesting. I don't know how long we've been talking about personalization, and I would hazard a guess that not every, even large retailer, every large retailer is still doing personalization, and I can give an example of website personalization, but we can take that to email personalization. But personalization is a big one, and we've had a couple of demos, and we found I've used other platforms, but I think it's personalization. It doesn't matter which technology you use because there's a ton of good ones out there at different price points.
Sure.
But it's always funny to see that we talk about personalization. Every conference talks about it. And then people might send one personalized email and be like, "Yes, we're doing personalization." So
tick that box. And
and you can go back. I'm not advocating to one by any means. It's hard to become Amazon, but to do a one to many approach,
I think,
if we have boys and girls, you have genders especially on clothing sites, you know that you can segment these groups into customer personas or customer segments. Mm-hmm. So I'm always surprised at how much talk happens on that. And then you go to all these sites and they kind of look and
one site for everyone.
Yeah.
One site that rules them all. I guess. So is your approach as you think about these things that you kind of at least batch your personas that when people come to the site and they've typically bought or told you they want, women's, men's, boys, girls, that's mostly what they're going to be presented. Is that your kind of point of arrival as you think about how you execute?
Yeah, signals. I call them signals. Using those signals of for a new user, sure, but you'll still have you can create a segment for new users that has worked in the past. If you show this will work. If you show these type of products, new users will convert. But once you acquire, they come to the site a couple of times and you start acquiring these signals, that's when you can make some of the content changes or make content show a certain way to them, and then recommended products feeds into that
so
overall
a signal
strategy.
is what they searched for or browsed for,
clicked
or
on, added to cart but didn't buy. What referral channel are they coming on? Are they coming from social? Are they coming from paid search on Google? Or are they coming from Facebook? So all those little signals that could add up, and that's why I said the technology's there. We have the technology to do it.
It seems like technology. I mean, it's a great point because it feels like technology has kind of been pushed aside as either the excuse or the inhibitor. Because when I first started in e-commerce, in 2000, it was $1 million to take a credit card online.
Right.
It was hard, and you put way too much focus into the site and will it be ready to sustain the volume and all those things. Now, many of those have been kind of, so to speak, taken off the table, but other things are more important.
Yeah, and so I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about skill set and talent. Sometimes I don't know if it's a talent thing or maybe agencies that some of these retailers or sites, right? Sometimes they're run by agencies, and then there's a couple of people running it. But I don't know what it is, but the technology is there. And then I've been on stage or at conferences and then talked to people after, and they're like, "Oh yeah, but you have massive budgets." Okay, maybe enterprise has bigger budgets. I've also been on the other side, the small to mid, which is where I am now, and I can tell you there is a technology tool for everyone, right? If you want the IBMs of the world, you have them, Salesforce of the world, and then there's a ton of other companies. Shopify started out that way, right? That are not that expensive, and they'll work for you because they're trying to grow.
Right.
So it's there for everybody, just like email, right? In the past, maybe there was a few companies that did it, and maybe they were expensive. That's not an excuse anymore. The cost of that tool is not an excuse. So why aren't more people doing this? And that's why sometimes I feel like it's a talent thing because people are having trouble maybe keeping their head above water because they have to handle email and paid search programs and run social media and so on. So it's I don't have any time for personalization.
Right.
I
just get the base done.
Yeah. And I think mobile is definitely way better than it was, but this is still if you ask people if they're thrilled with their mobile sites, the answer is probably still no. We've been talking about this for so long, and I feel like personalization is going to be that thing we're still talking about in 3 years because people haven't mastered that, even though the technology is there. Technology is actually there.
So it gives me optimism that, and I hear this occasionally, but it's great to hear that there's something out there for everyone to be fairly sophisticated. So let's just close on talking about building your team. So you're building it. You came here, and probably there's some folks already here, and you're building a team. What are you looking for in the people that you build, and how are you structuring your roles around where your point of arrival is in being successful?
Yeah, if people aren't excited about the opportunities or passionate about what they're doing, whether it's retail or another industry, it's going to be hard to love what you do. And that's what we've been looking for. We've been looking for, And I'm not a big formal interview guy. Like I like going for a coffee or something less formal, and just being at ease and really having a frank conversation with the person on the other end, and seeing if there's a fit from, you know, how is this flowing as a conversation?
Sure.
Do we have the same goals in mind? And are you passionate about this? And this kind of served me well. And like I said, yeah, maybe how we're building it isn't for everybody, but I'm not looking for everybody. Right? We're looking for a certain kind of skill set and attitude, and that's actually more important sometimes than actual experience. I think sometimes people look. 10 years ago, people may have looked for degrees in that way. It's like, oh, you must have a degree to go on. And I think today, I see a ton of resumes where they're asking for, call it a specialist level or a coordinator level with 3 to 5 years experience. And, maybe they don't need 5 years experience to be at a coordinator level, because if they're willing to learn and you're willing to teach, you may be bypassing a ton of candidates by looking for 5 years experience. Because if you tell HR you're looking for 5 years experience, what are they going to do?
They're going to find 5 years, 5 years plus experience.
And that leaves a lot of other people off the table. Like sometimes you want those raw 1-2 years experience or at a university because they're so hungry to learn. And that learning curve, it's kind of like when you learn languages at an early age. Same thing here with that learning curve. If you can get them that early, they will take on so much of what you want because they're so thirsty to learn.
Right.
And we've found that's a big thing. But again, it goes back to if they don't want to learn and if they don't believe in continuous learning, probably not the right fit. One of the questions, maybe if someone hears this, then they'll prepare for it. But I always ask people if they read. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a book, but I want to get to that thinking, like, and if they say yes, then I'll probe a bit, right? Because I want to understand, like, how are you keeping up with what's happening in this industry, and how are you going to keep up? Because if all you do is watch Netflix like 4 hours every night, how are you going to keep up on this industry that changes so quickly? And a
bit of insight into the personality.
Absolutely. Right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just like how we've, I mentioned before, like having a bit of a formula or a science for these things. And that's kind of what I've found out over the years is like this framework kind of works.
I was talking to, just reminded me, I was talking to a guy named Dan Pink, and you may know him as he's an author, and he and I wound up in the same car, and I said, what's the most interesting question you can ask in a job interview? And he said, the most interesting question I always ask, or he advised, is, are you lucky? And he says you get two very different schools of answers. Some people go, I've never won the lottery, I'm not lucky at all, nothing. And then the other people go, well, listen, I'm born in North America. I'm born into this part of the world. He says it's a very interesting, deep response. The first response is, yeah, of course I'm lucky. Look at me. I'm here in North America. I have clothes on my back, and we're here talking together. And other people are just never. So it really
that's a great story, and I'm gonna keep that in mind.
Feel free to. I've used it as well, and it's very interesting. Listen, it's been such a treat catching up with you. How do people get a hold of you if they want to reach out or learn more?
I have a blog on my name, so it's johnnyrusso.com. Very accessible on LinkedIn and all the other social channels that everyone knows. But yeah, I try to blog. It's one of my goals to blog more often. This year is once a month I'm trying to blog, and next year maybe I'll do once every other week. But as you know, doing a podcast, like sometimes those schedules don't align.
It's a bit of a beast for sure. So I congratulate you on doing it at all, because it can be tough to fit in. So thanks again for sitting down with me. Great to catch up, and wish you all the best and success.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for visiting.
Well, all right. What a great couple of interviews. So great to be back in Montreal, and thanks again to Mitch and Johnny for being my guests this week. Now let's hit the highlights from retail this week e-newsletter, biggest retail weekly in Canada. You can subscribe for free on retailcouncil.org. It is the companion piece to the podcast in many ways, and a compendium, curated look at retail news in Canada and around the world. We kick it off with Longo's. Longo's launches Pronto Eats, and a big shout out to my very good friend and one of the savviest merchants I know, Joey Bernardo, who is leading initiatives like this at Longo's. It's so interesting. It's a cashless store. That's interesting point number one. It's plastic bag free. customers are able to order online via Grocery Gateway. So ticks so many boxes in what modern retailers are thinking about in terms of their format. It's not the format that's going to be the entire chain. It's not perfect for everywhere, but it certainly looks like it's great for here. It's open at 6:30 a.m. And anyway, I can go on and on about Pronto Eats. It's a good article in Grocery Business, but be sure, it's in Toronto, be sure and experience that from one of Canada's best regional grocers, Longo's. In other news, interestingly, Drone, and this is another great regional retailer, so to speak, London Drug, a drone test flight successfully delivers prescription drugs for the first time in Canada. So this kind of snuck out there, actually, but I found with Canada Post, London Drugs, they test drones as a way of delivering prescription drugs to remote areas. This is from the CBC News, and it's fascinating. I think it was very important because it was one of those ones where they didn't have direct sight of the drone, so it was a really breakthrough pilot. So congratulations to London Drug, such an innovative retailer based in Vancouver and operating in Western Canada. Of course, their online store ships nationwide, so be sure and check them out. A couple of videos to check out. This one from Canadian Tire CFO Dean McCann talking about their Canadian Tire's credit card business. There was some noise, so to speak, in the market that they thought the credit card business could be under some stress if Canadians' debt got too great, and what part of their business or EBITDA or whatever is their credit card business. But they've been running that book of business for a long time. Very savvy operators. So Dean talks about that and other elements of the model. And we've got a neat grocery store, Decio and Sons from New York. And I just picked that video because it's from Progressive Grocer, and it's really a nice look at a very regional grocer and the way they're approaching some things the same, some things a little different. Article from the Globe and Mail. It's cool to hang out at the mall again. This is they got an image here from CF. Just talking about how smartphones and convenience of online shopping has diminished the need to visit physical stores. We kind of intuitively know that with challenges towards and how hard it is to drive store traffic, but yet malls still have a big role to play in a whole bunch of ways. Beautiful spaces, social experiences, and so forth and so on. So a good article there from the Globe and Mail. Toys R Us flips the script on flyers. So, Sport Check and IKEA pretty famous in the industry for moving aggressively into digital flyers and digital catalogs. Now Toys R Us Canada is doing the same thing, and it's a good case study. We're using the great vendor Flip. And by the way, you can learn more about these strategies at the Flyer Marketing Symposium, Retail Flyer Forum, hosted by the Retail Council of Canada. Check out their sites in October. Check out retailcouncilofcanada.org for more information on that. Be sure and be there. That's in Toronto. What else have we got? Amazon is, always a couple of Amazon stories to talk about. Of course, this one in Canada, they've been hiring up fast for the Tsawwassen Fulfillment Center out in Vancouver. This is in the Vancouver Sun. They filled 800 jobs. So Amazon continues to expand globally and certainly in Canada as well. Retailing around the world, the most interesting story I found really was Walmart's announcement they were going to limit ammunition sales and discourage open carry guns in stores. So I've covered not the Amazon, but the Walmart reaction and the horrible events that happened in their store in El Paso. And Doug McMillan has done such an amazing job of leadership through such a difficult time. And he said weeks ago that they would take time and have a measured but very focused response. And I think it's a really fascinating. There's a great, by the way, if you're into podcasts, and of course you're into podcasts, you're listening to mine, but if you're into other podcasts, which I hope you are, New York Times did a great podcast special edition on this issue and Walmart's reaction to it. So check it out. This is in the New York Times, and again, check out their podcast. So it's really interesting, their reaction, and in fact, the risks in America for coming out on either side of this polarizing issue in America are pretty high. But I guess in the short term, at least, for sure, Walmart stock went up, not down, if that's any indication. But let's see how that plays its way out. And I think I've already heard that other retailers are taking the lead from Walmart and starting to do at least, if they don't sell bullets or guns or ammunition, just saying don't bring open carry guns into our store. So anyway, check that out. It's a very important story. What else? Great article from the Robin Report, or report from the Robin Report. Retailers are relying on the wrong numbers to tell the state of business. So that's a very interesting report. Check that out from the Robin Report again, so to speak, that, look at the different metrics, and the metrics don't always match for every different stage of development and operating under different business models. So one size definitely is not fitting all. What else we got in local Toronto bookstore seller Ben McNally closes for building renovations. I guess the risk there that's articulated in the article from the Globe and Mail might not open. And, this is more about how high rents, buildings that get converted into condos are pushing out small and mid-sized businesses. So check that article out. That would be a sad loss to the independent bookstore community. And from CBC, My Heart is Here. The Lighthouse Fish Market is for sale 34 years after being the Kensington Market, I guess, of Hamilton. So it's a great story as well. New edition out of the Canadian Retailer magazine. I'll have an interview with senior editor Sean Terry next week. It's the technology, digital technology. There's a great article, AI 2.0 from Canadian Retailer, and on the theme of digital retailer, I got an article here from Fast Company on JCPenney, former JCPenney, Ron Johnson is redeeming himself with Enjoy. Of course, he's more famous probably, more famous for Apple or JCPenney, but he certainly is a pioneer, and he's raised a pile of cash and is launched this Enjoy concept and special announcement. Ron Johnson will be at DTL in Montreal, Retail Council of Canada, CCCD's conference in Montreal, coming up on early November. Learn more, get your tickets. What a great opportunity to see this retailing legend live on the stage, and hopefully I'll have the opportunity to chit and chat with him for the podcast as well. That'll be a real treat for me, such a pioneer and such an amazing force in retail. All right, well, that brings to a close this edition of the Voice of Retail. Sorry for my voice. I got a bit of a cold, so a little bit more nasally than I would like. So apologies for that. But as I said, that's a wrap on this edition of The Voice of Retail. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple iTunes, favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review, and be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of M.E. LeBlanc Company, Inc. You can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a great week.